So thank you, and I appreciate you coming today. It's an important Friday, and as I just explained, there is a real strength at work in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We continue to be financially stronger than we have ever been in the history of the Commonwealth, and that is a tremendous asset for us. Our AAA bond rating is an anchor, and that is driven by responsible budget management, but on top of that, just the strength of Virginia. And I'm very pleased that we're able to work today in order to not just preserve that strength, but advance it. As we have record investments with our projected surplus in so many areas, and yet we are able to take this moment and set aside a portion of that surplus that has not been realized yet in order to make sure if there are bumps in the road down the way, we can handle them. So very, very good budget today. I'm very happy with it. And I do believe it will serve Virginians incredibly well. And I look forward to making sure that Virginia continues to be the very best state in America to live, work, and raise a family. I'm really happy to take questions from folks. I know there's news of the day. If I could keep everybody focused for the beginning of this on budget in the day, and then of course I'll get to news of the day afterwards. Great.
So can you speak to some of the line item vetoes? Any particular projects or lines that you remove that you'd like to highlight?
Well, first of all, let me talk about the things that are in, because I think that's really important. And so there is a shared commitment to make sure that Virginia continues to lead the nation in education at all levels. And so therefore, record investments in education, making sure that funding for students with special needs is at the level that we agreed, making sure that incremental funding to change the support caps, which provides $223 million every year going forward for K through 12 education, making sure that we've got incremental funding so that we can remove people from the waiting list for childcare, and making sure that Virginia's kids continue to have an opportunity for the greatest education in America. Higher ed continues to be a very big emphasis, and there's over $200 million of incremental support for affordable access and for special partnerships with the higher ed system in order to push forward on particular projects at each one of the universities. And of course, there's a big IT project that the universities are working on in a collaborative way. We make sure we funded that. We must continue to fund our responsibilities under Medicaid. And that's exactly what we did. We fully fund it. And that is really important, and also the needs under the Child Services Act, fully funded. Those big areas are really important. We share a real commitment to maternal health care across the General Assembly and here. I will say, some of you may not have seen, but the maternal mortality rate in Virginia has been reduced by nearly 50%, and that is a combined effort. And I'm very, very proud of the work that we have done to see this great reduction. But I also want to reemphasize that a single death of a mom is something we need to eliminate. And so there is an enormous amount of support for these shared priorities. The biggest area of the $900 million of cushion that we have taken against the forecasted surplus is in capital projects. And as I said, there are 10 capital projects, mostly higher ed, that are in pre-planning, early planning, or mid-planning, that are not moving into construction, where the money was already being appropriated now, and candidly would go sit in an account and not be used. And therefore, we can postpone the final appropriation for these very worthy 10 projects and enable the General Assembly to take it back up in January. I have said that I would really like to include them in my introduced budget and a caboose budget, and then the General Assembly can go to work. And so that's the biggest piece of the $900 million, and I think that is very responsible for us to do and enable us to make sure that should these risks that we might see around employment levels in Virginia present themselves, that we are not having to take dramatic action, but in fact can weather it very well.
What are some of the non-capital project related vetoes?
So there are a number of projects that are new in nature that I suggest that the General Assembly take them up in January. And so these projects include things like in child care, an innovative idea to set up a collaborative private-public partnership. It's not ready for prime time yet. And I do believe that some more work in the General Assembly in January will really bring it to the point where it can be launched and be very effective. So there is a basket of things that really aren't quite ready for prime time, and therefore we don't need to appropriate for them right now. There's a basket of things that there's other pockets to support. And so some of the long-term piping investments, water investments, there's big funds set aside for that. And so I just encouraged everyone to use existing appropriations in order to fund those things. There's other areas where there is already money existing and it hasn't been used, and yet there's more money being put on top. And so I suggested to everyone, let's use the funds that are there first, and then come back in January and ask for more. And then finally, as I said, this capital project is the biggest piece.
Can you identify some of the others besides the
There's a
daycare?
whole list that will be coming out.
Are we getting it soon?
Yes.
Governor,
Yes.
you had talked about a $300 million addition to reserves a few months ago. Now we're talking 900. Has your view about the risks changed?
Yeah, so two things. First and foremost, line item veto authority for a governor, unfortunately, is a blunt instrument. And there's not as much flexibility in line item veto as the name may suggest. And so as I went through and looked at all of the potential line item vetoes I had, because they did send back over 170 of my amendments without taking them up. And so I had a big universe to choose from. But the reality is, oftentimes when you use a line item veto in the context of a governor in a budget, it takes away lots of other things and it has unintended consequences. And so once we moved through all of that, we ended up with a much smaller pool of cushion than I thought was appropriate. And therefore, I had to look at capital. And the capital is constructed in the budget, and sorry to take everybody on a scuba dive here, but the capital is constructed in the budget in a way it's one item. And therefore, I could only go after the entire item. And I couldn't go through and just pick things out of the item. And therefore, I had to do the whole item. And that was the biggest piece of this 900. And so, Dave, I think it's important to understand I had a much smaller universe of potential cushion than I thought was appropriate, much less than the 300 and 600 that we talked about last time. And therefore, my one place I could go was capital. And as I said earlier, when I dug into all of these capital projects, they come in one group, one package of 10, and all of them are in a position where they're not in construction, that in fact this delay really will not interrupt the overall process of building them. And it does preserve for the General Assembly to come back and utilize different tools in order to fund them, one of which could be bonding in January.
And we're not saying that things are worse than we had thought.
Yeah, I think the risks that I identified back in March when we were all together are the same risks. I think we do recognize that the federal government is going to reduce the federal workforce. That Virginia has a substantial representation of that workforce. And I can't express loudly enough the deep empathy that I have for those families. It is a tough thing to go through. The reality of it is that Virginia is protected a bit because of our defense, national security, and intelligence community infrastructure. And on top of that, we have lots of open jobs. And so the extent to which we are transitioning people out of those federal jobs that will be lost into new jobs, and the timing that takes, is a risk that's hard to judge. We can do this as a Commonwealth, but the timing of that is still not yet understood. And so that's the primary risk that I want to make sure that we have a cushion in order to support ourselves against. And again, I want to reemphasize, we're talking about a projected surplus. We're talking about a big budget uplift, and I just don't want us to spend it all in advance of us realizing it.
I had a follow-up on that. So I remember when we were talking about the revenue deposit, you wanted to get up to $5 billion, and that was a $300 million level. If I understand what you're saying to Dave, is that you would have gone up to 900 before.
No, it's the flip side.
Okay.
The flip side today, because I couldn't, let me try this again. Because the line item veto doesn't allow you to really go with a scalpel.
Right.
You have to go take whole items. And some of the items that I might have taken a scalpel to, if I go after the whole item, have a whole lot of collateral damage of things that we want to keep in the budget. And therefore, I can't line item veto them.
So you wouldn't have been able to make it to the 300.
So I wouldn't have been able to make it
So
to a
that's why-
level that would have, I think, provided adequate cushion, which left us capital.
Got it.
And as a result, capital was, again, a big item, and the only way to deal with it was to take all 10 projects at one time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, good. And in this case, we are not able to make a deposit into the rainy day fund because that is not, I'm not capable of doing that under line item veto. So it will just look like $900 million of forecasted revenue that is not appropriated.
Got it. What, I guess on this note, you were weighing a lot of risks in this. Could you kind of explain to Virginians your approach to risk generally? You know, there was short-term risk and long-term risk. There's probably, you know, things that you thought that Virginians may have been able to withstand the risk of certain expenditures. What's your general approach to risk in the economy? And I guess throughout your term, you know, coming from business, has there been a difference in the way that you would have approached it as somebody in you know, in your previous job as an executive versus this?
I firmly believe that my previous professional experience could not have prepared me any better for what we are doing today. And in fact, this is exactly the way that we approached forecasting and risk management in my previous life. And just to step back, my baseline expectations are these. That, again, what the president is doing is resetting in trade imbalances that need to be reset. He is also reestablishing fiscal responsibility in Washington. What I expect to see happen is that over the course of the next few months, trade deals are going to be announced. I think that they will be unique trade deals with individual counterparties other than Europe. We'll take a whole group. And those trade deals will open up markets for products to be sent to those countries. Those trade deals will result in lower tariff levels than the ones where they are today. And on top of that, we will see increased investment in America from companies wanting to domicile. In fact, I just had a conversation over the last 24 hours with another one that wanted domicile in America and hopefully Virginia. And therefore, that process, as it moves along, does result in long-term opportunity, but it will have near-term dislocation. Now, finally, and I think this is an important step along the way, is that I believe that there will be a budget bill that will be resolved in Congress. The current reports are favorable, and I think the combination of trade deals and a budget bill, I think, will be incredibly good for near-term prospects. But again, Virginia, because of our high concentration of federal workers and contractors, I think does absorb a larger risk of the reset of spending in Washington, and therefore our ability to counteract that risk by first having lots of jobs, by second of all having a government workforce that is in some really strong industries. And I'll reiterate, the announcement for Newport News Shipbuilding was enormous for the next 2 Virginia-class attack submarines. And then finally, to take a portion of our projected surplus, which is a surplus above record budget levels, and just setting it aside as cushion, I think is a prudent way to budget. The combination of all of that is to have scenarios where we are tracking along the way and understanding that if risks that we think might present themselves actually do, it doesn't knock us off course.
I'll be the bad guy here and move it on to the news of the day.
Anyway, let me just stop real quick. Anybody else on this topic? Yes, sir.
People who are concerned about the previous Trump administration's economic promises, his own ability to kind of self-sabotage some projects, what would you say to reassure folks that this term will be different? And how would you say that the promises made by the Trump administration are going to come to pass this time?
So I don't agree with your premise,
That's
so I'll
fine,
start
that's
there.
fine,
But
sir.
it
I
always
appreciate it.
starts with a good premise.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
But I don't agree with your premise. What I would want to clearly communicate, and I've clearly communicated this repeatedly, is that I do believe that there will be trade deals, good trade deals for America that are negotiated. We saw the framework of the first one now 10 days ago, which was India. And for those of you that haven't studied Indian markets, I mean, basically it's been very difficult for the United States to export into India. And India is the fastest growing market in the world. And so to have an opportunity for America and Virginia to export into India, and particularly to be able to export our agriculture products into India, soybeans, which is one of our largest export products to a market that historically has been not open to us, that is a big, big step. And of course, we all are watching as the administration does acknowledge that there are 75 trade deals underway and that many of them are advancing faster than others. That is a really good thing. And so that's a milestone. The second, of course, is the congressional action around a budget bill. And as I said, I believe that's a really important step as well. I think the opportunity for us to settle that and to provide certainty into having a federal budget bill done is really, really important. And I do think that will result in markets continue to have confidence that America is the best place for capital to flow. All of that, I think, is a pathway that the administration and President Trump have been clearly explaining and describing, and they're making real progress along that pathway. And that's why I would say to Virginians, I'm optimistic about the long term. And I understand in the short term there are potentially dislocations. And for particular individuals who are federal workers who may or have lost their jobs, we're here for you. We're ready to go to work with you. There are lots of opportunities, and the Commonwealth continues to attract an enormous amount of investment. And that is going to provide long-term growth for us that will continue to support long-term investment requirements and spending requirements for Virginia for years to come.
A sort of a budget question, but is Virginia's trigger law with Medicaid expansion and the possibility that federal support level of 90% might go away, is that something that you're thinking about in terms of the budget?
So we are engaging with all comers on the Medicaid assessment. And let me just begin. I think that the first place that everyone needs to go is fraud, waste, and abuse. To put things in context, there's roughly a $900 billion a year Medicaid price tag. And $600 billion of that comes from the federal government, and roughly $300 of that comes from the states. There is an estimate that there's anywhere between 15 and 30% fraud, waste, and abuse. And when you really get down to it, even at the lower level of that, Dave, if there is 15% fraud, waste, and abuse, and we can go get that, well, that actually meets the federal government objectives of savings in Medicaid. I think we are paying close attention to the 90% threshold. You're right, there is a trigger law in Virginia. And my current understanding is that is not something that is advancing, but we're paying close attention. We have met with the Hospital Association and lots of participants in our healthcare system frequently over the course of the last few weeks. I've been in contact with our congressional delegations, and I've been talking to the White House. And I think for us, we just want to make sure that we are prepared to react to what's coming out of this budget bill. But I also believe that there is a very straightforward way to deal with this, which is fraud, waste, and abuse is projected to be big in Medicaid. The numbers are large. And if there's a 20% reduction in fraud, waste, and abuse, then they take out $180 billion a year in Medicaid spending between the federal government and the states.
I guess I'll be the bad guy
Yeah.
again.
I mean, I'm not, we're not going to go anywhere, so I'm not rushing off. So
Thank you.
Any other comments on this topic? I just want to make sure everybody's got what they need. So let me wrap up on this. I appreciate everybody's real attention here. This is an important moment for our Commonwealth because I think we have really distinguished ourselves in the strength that we have financially and how we translate that strength into making sure that we are able to increase our funding in so many really important areas, candidly, while other states aren't able to do that. And other states are having to reduce funding or raise taxes. And the financial dynamism of Virginia is our biggest strength. And the clear, responsible budgeting processes that we engage in enable us to use that strength so that we can chart a clear path forward that doesn't have big disruptions in it, but also meets risks if they present themselves. And so thank you for giving me a chance to talk about that. Okay, do you really want to be the bad guy?
I won't have a premise for you to disagree with,
Okay,
but there's obviously been a lot in the news about John Reed. He's been defiant that he's going to stay in the race for lieutenant governor. He implied that he felt betrayed by people who he helped get elected in the past, assuming that's you. Did you betray John Reed? And if he is still the Republican nominee, will you campaign with him later this year?
Let me just back up. There's been a lot that's gone on over the last week, and so let me just be really clear where we are. This is John Reed's decision. He is the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. That was announced last Tuesday, and he is the Republican nominee for governor. And he has clearly made up his mind that he's going to stay in. And so he is the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. And I think the debate can stop there because that's the answer. What we do know is that Virginia is doing incredibly well. And I believe it is doing incredibly well because of the common sense Republican approach to reducing taxes, to building opportunity by growing jobs and attracting companies, to making our communities safer by standing up for victims and making sure we prosecute those that do bad things, that our education system is truly leading, where we are rebounding out of K through 12. We have record investment. We are watching Virginia lead on how to be innovative around K through 12 education, and I think we're going to be very, very pleased with the overall results for our K through 12. And we finally are watching government work in a way that I think in collaboration with our General Assembly is charting a really promising path going forward. Those are the issues that Virginia voters need to focus on and should be focusing on. And I think that that it's important that they do focus on it. And that's what I'm going to be talking
Will
about a
you
lot.
campaign with him and for him later in the year?
Yeah, we're going to, I have said that I will support the nominees and their ticket. And at the end of the day, Republicans need to win. And that's the bottom line. And so, again, backing up, the fundamental progress we have made in Virginia over the course of the last 3 years and 4 months has been monumental. And it is rested on some clear building blocks that I believe have transformed Virginia into one of the leading states in America. There are winning states and there are losing states, and we are a winning state. And I think it's really important that voters understand that we can't go back to what we had in 2020 and 2021. We've got to continue to press forward with common sense practices and governing and decisions so that we can continue to deliver all of the great opportunity that I think Virginia sees today.
Can you clarify what Matt Moran's position is at the moment with Spirit of Virginia, and if he's no longer there, did you ask for him to step down in anything?
Yeah, so Matt stepped aside earlier this week, and he understood that with all of this going on, it was really hard for him to dedicate 100% of his focus to the really important work going on at Spirit of Virginia. And we have announced that Becca Glover, who was part of our administration for a long time, will be stepping in as executive director of our PAC. And I think Becca will do a really, really good job. She's trusted. We know her. She was part of our administration for a long time, and so she knows the kinds of things that are most important to us. And we've got to get on with winning, and this is what we have to do. And again, I'm going to go back to something I've said now twice, but I just want to say it one last time. Virginians appreciate what we are doing. $9 billion of tax relief, record job expansion, record investment from companies moving to or expanding in Virginia, safer communities, record investment in schools in order to prioritize multiple pathways for kids and standards of excellence and putting parents back in charge of their children's lives, and running government responsibly so that we can deliver for the next generation an even better Virginia than the great one we have today. That's the work at hand, is to make sure that Virginians understand that there are two parties that are running, and our party has demonstrated real success with these common sense approaches. And I don't think Virginians want to go back to what we had in 2020 and 2021. I think they want to move forward, and I think that's the message that we have to get out to everybody.
Thank you, everybody. The governor's got to sign some bills now. Thank you.
Governor, do you take
Are they gonna
responsibility
show up
for
on
creating
LIS?
this? And did your team leak this to the Richmonder, which called John Reed for comment before his campaign manager even got across town to see the pictures that Matt Moran had?
Laura, as I said very clearly that I first learned about this last Thursday night.
Right.
I was briefed on Friday morning, and John and I spoke Friday morning, and that is what I've said to everybody. That's the truth, and I think all the suggestions that there's anything else beyond that are actually pretty preposterous. So thank you.
Preposterous that you're
Thank you,
saying
Governor.
that-
stance on same-sex marriage will impact the ticket.
What's that?
Can you tell us about some of the other bills?
So there will be a full thing this afternoon on all the bills, and we are signing a bunch of them and vetoing some. And as you can imagine, there are bills that I have vetoed before that we're vetoing again, and there are a lot of bills that I think are very interesting that I hadn't seen before, that we tried to make a little better. We didn't get the amendments passed, but I'm going to sign them because I think they actually are pretty decent bills. And so we'll have a whole package out this afternoon.
Governor, what's with the road line? What's with the road line, Governor? That's new.